Start the recording. And we'll start with Valtteri. You can go first, and then we'll do Dirk and John and me, and then Mike.
Okay. I'm
yeah, just where you are, a brief description of what you do, and your a quick little thing about your how this registers with you.
Yeah, I'm from Finland and have worked in like continuous improvement and quality like 12 years already. So I first learned lean and then like 5 years ago started to read more and just hit the Deming Institute podcast and started to learn also about Deming after that more. So now I have, I think, one of the biggest Deming libraries in Finland, maybe. Try to find every book that there is.
Very
So
good.
that's, and I'm also Lean Six Sigma black belt, so I have that kind of certificate. But in reality, I more believe in Deming and most aspects of the Lean.
Understand? Okay.
Yeah.
Dirk, where are you?
Hello, everybody. Dirk Van Putten. I'm a quality manager for Monolithic Power Systems. We design and sell analog semiconductors to manage power. I live in Holland, Michigan, work remotely from home, and started my Deming journey in the early 2000s through a chance contact with Bill Bellows. Then also there was a gentleman, I believe his name was Jim Clausen, that ran the Deming Electronic Network, I believe it was. And so it was a contact with Jim Clausen and Bill Bellows that started my transformation in my thinking. So great to be here.
Okay. John, you're up next.
I'm John Lenhart. I'm in Miami, Florida. I am more of an ACOF fan than Deming, and I connected with Bill Bellows 2 years ago because of ACOF. And Bill has slowly, over 2 years, converted me to a Deming supporter. And then I'm a big Mike Beck fan because I was in the book club with him, the first one of the New Economics, and just loved the stories. There was a couple of things Mike said that I actually took as my own and told to other people all the time. So I'm a big Mike Beck fan. So I'm looking forward to this.
Okay. Jim, can you share with us where you are, who you are, and how you come to be interested in this topic?
Of course. Everybody, I'm Jim Lawton. I'm based in Doha, Qatar. I work for the National Ambulance Service. I first met Bill in 2019 at the Institute for Healthcare Improvement National Forum when he was doing a session on Deming for the 21st century, and stayed in touch pretty much from then, apart from a bit of a hiatus during COVID. And I lead the Chartered Quality Institute Deming network that previously was a special interest group.
Okay.
Nice to see you all.
Nice to see you. My name's Chuck Boone. I'm masquerading as Monica and Bill Bellows here to host this webinar. I am on a job search currently, and my last gig was as VP of operations for a small manufacturing company, mainly aerospace and medical device type products. Way down the bill of material though, so not end items, but to component pieces. And then I met Bill at an Apex meeting, and a year later I saw an ad for that and it was how to pick wine for dinner. And one of my other my contacts had seen the same thing and said, "Oh, I want to find out how to pick wine for dinner." And I said, I know the speaker here. It's not going to be actually how to pick wine for dinner. But anyway, I've been hooked on this pretty much since that second after after dinner meeting type thing, and been to all the forums since 2010, and his In Thinking Together class, much of the other stuff they used to offer at Rocketdyne, and I've met most of you, you know, through that affiliation.
Okay, well, I'm Mike Beck, speaker today. My background with Dr. Deming goes back to 1984. I was a young engineer at General Motors, had received a fellowship from GM, got a master's degree, came back thinking that I knew quite a bit. And I went to my first Deming 4-day seminar in the summer. It was June of 1984. And I was blown away by the realization that I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. There was a whole bunch of things I had missed and didn't get from the business school education that I had just graduated from. And I spent the next few years after that self-study, and that led to a change in job from engine development engineer to a Powertrain Statistical Network. Did another master's degree in statistics. General Motors paid for that one as well, and had a lot of fun working with Dr. Deming and making some changes there. Have attempted to apply it in all my positions and responsibilities thereafter. I've had some senior operations roles. I've been a consultant, and right now happily retired in Connecticut. Today is day 2 of the program of Deming 101. Yesterday, for those of you who weren't here, we covered a timeline of Deming's life and his contributions, what he did when, all the things he was involved in, and kind of covered his life story in very fast fashion. Then we covered 14 points and 7 deadly diseases out of the crisis. Today and we covered the first of the system of profound knowledge content theory of variation. We talked about statistics, common causes, special causes of variation, the difference between analytic and enumerative studies, and the kinds of mistakes that you can make when looking at data with statistical graphs, and basically control charts was the topic. So we're going to proceed today through the remainder of a system of profound knowledge. And we will end with some observations I made from some of the interactions I had with Dr. Deming. So theory of knowledge. Theory of knowledge is a little esoteric, but the content I'm going to cover is plan, do, study, act cycle, operational definitions, and how do we learn and improve. So theory as a basis for learning. Dr. Deming always started the introduction to this with a story about Chanticleer the rooster. And Chanticleer the rooster, from Chaucer's book of 1420, Chanticleer, he was a rooster in a barnyard. He was very proud of himself. Every morning he woke up early and he crowed and he crowed. And by golly, every day after he crowed, the sun would come up. And he was certain that he was the reason that the sun would come up. It happened every single day. He would crow just before the sun would rise, and then it rose. One day, he overslept. He woke up, the sun was already up, and he realized, crestfallen, that, oh my gosh, I guess it happened without me. Maybe I wasn't the reason the sun rose. And that is the example he gave to introduce the idea that no number of examples proves a theory. If you watch something happen and you see a pattern of events and it happens over and over and over again, over time it might become an accepted theory, but it's not a proof. There's no such thing as a proven theory. Just one example that doesn't follow the predicted result disproves the theory. And it therefore provides an opportunity for learning. So that's a key idea. People think that theories are proven. Theories become accepted, but they're not proven. Any comments, questions about that?
No.
Plan, do, study, act cycle. This used to be called the plan, do, check, act cycle. Dr. Deming had heard somebody be confused. They thought the word check meant to block, kind of like in hockey, you get checking. And to avoid that misunderstanding, he changed the word to study. So when you're trying to make an improvement, you first plan. What is it you're trying to accomplish? You plan a change or a test aimed at improvement. Then you carry out the change or test, preferably on a small scale, if you can do that. Then you study the results. What went wrong? What did we learn? And there's all kinds of ways things can go wrong. And you can learn that so far your idea holds up, and you've got a theory that so far looks reasonable. You can find that what you didn't carry it out properly, and therefore the experiment didn't work the way you thought it would, and you have to start over again. Sometimes it works, you carry it out perfectly, and you get a different result than expected, but it's not bad, it's good. You might have something that is an exceptional on the good side. But based on what you see after you conduct the experiment, you then act. You either adopt the change, you abandon it, or you run through the cycle again. And this is generally Kaizen in the Japanese framework, works on this process. It's plan, do, study, act cycles over and over and over, step by step by step, incremental small changes. One of the experiences I had during my career was working for Toyota for about 6 years, helping them put together TMMNA, working on their corporate quality organization. And I learned a lot there. And one of the things I learned is a means of doing the plan, do, study, act cycle in a improvement on an annual basis framework. And what they call it is Hoshin Kanri. And I'm going to share an example of plan, do, study, act on management processes. And this is a strategic planning or strategy deployment process. This is an example that I was running in 2006 at one of my responsibilities with that company, Chubb Worldwide. It was a UTC company. And what I wanted to show is that plan, do, study, act can be in a disciplined way on an annual basis conducted and get very good results. The way this is set up, there was a strategic plan, and at the far left references items 2 and 5 for the first row, items 1, 4, and 2 for the, or 1.4 and 2 for the second, etc. Then there's the priority at this level of responsibility, and the implementation plan, who's responsible, what the target or measure was, and what the timeline and schedule was for this. So this is a plan that you set up at the beginning of the year, and then you track yourself through the year. The key is what happens, the check and act. The check is the 2 columns with the colors, and you're checking 2 different things, activity and result. Now, when I learned this process at Toyota, we only had red or green. It was difficult for my peers to handle just red or green. What if we're within 10%? Don't we get some credit for that? So I introduced a yellow within 10% of the activity result. And it was kind of a judgment call. But let's simplify this and make it red or green. There would be therefore 4 different potential results. After running this for a year, the activity could be green or red. Activity green means you carried it out in a way that was consistent with what you had planned. No surprises. The planned activity was conducted. and it was conducted well. The result is red or green, and that result, either you achieved the intended change or you did not. So if you're green, activity is good, results good, your idea here is, well done. Do we need to do more? Or what should we do in the future? What's your comment on that? Meetings held on schedule, continue in 2006. If you are green on activity, but you are red for result, that must mean that your theory was wrong. You had an idea of how it worked. You conducted the activity in a way consistent with what you intended, but it didn't achieve the desired change result. So that's a problem with your theory. So you have to figure out what that's all about. You might have activity red and result red. Well, you didn't get it done. You didn't do the work properly, and therefore, why would you expect to get the result? You could, however, have the activity red and the result green. That's interesting. You didn't know what happened. You probably set a very soft target, and it was something unrelated to what you were doing that caused the result. That's something to go dig into. So anyway, I just wanted to share this at a very high level to show that you can conduct plan, do, study, act cycles in management. Here's an approach.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I was just visiting one Toyota handling machine place, and they had only this result, and I was like, is this really right? So it's quite interesting to see to this one that there was this activity also.
Yeah.
But I was thinking that there is missing this study part if you are just thinking getting the result with Hoshin country.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
go on. Sure, go ahead.
okay, thank you. I was just going to say almost the same thing. I don't know when the idea was exposed to me and from where, but the subtle difference between at least the connotation of a check versus study is that check tends to be perceived as looking at only the results, whereas study includes looking at, did you perform or do the do, if you will, as intended? Did you perform the test as intended? Did you accomplish the task as intended? So the study, I believe, is very important to have, as in this example, look at the activity and the result. Done in science, hard science, physical sciences all the time. When you do an experiment, you look at first, did you complete this experiment as intended? Then you look at the results. So I think that's such an incredibly important thing to include the activity in addition to the results. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Mike.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. I'll go ahead and move ahead.
Well, Mike, I was going to say, can I say one thing real quick? This is why I'm such a big fan of yours, is you putting yellow squares in there is the psychology part of this. You're accounting for the people, So I love that you did yellow squares in there, and you're looking at the psychology part of the system.
It was important for me to do that to get a buy-in from my peers that this is a valid system. Yeah.
Awesome.
Wasn't completely binary.
Yeah. They wanted credit for being close.
What you didn't have an example of is where you followed the thing perfectly and it got worse.
The fourth row from the bottom, there's a green activity and a red result.
Okay, so it just did, but maybe that was one of them where it got worse or it didn't change.
No,
right?
actually, as I look at the note there, initial activity good, decided to defer by the president of the company.
Oh, yeah.
It was just a decision. Bandwidth. Let's cut off this one. Let's consider that for next year.
I gotcha. Yeah, but your theory could be so out of whack that you follow your improvement process perfectly, and then end up, we've wrecked something else.
Yes. Yeah.
that we didn't quite understand was connected.
Yeah. All right, I got to move ahead.
Yeah.
Operational definitions. An operational definition is one that people can do business with. It's one where in an operation which when put into practice, will arrive at a number to describe a characteristic agreed to by 2 or more people. Deming always used to use the example of you're going to buy a blanket from, you're in hospital procurement, you're buying a blanket, it's supposed to be 50% cotton, 50% polyester. And would it be acceptable to have a blanket made that's 100% cotton on half of the blanket, 100% polyester on the other, sewn together? It meets the criteria of 50-50. Well, you weren't quite clear on your operational definition. So you have to make sure you're thinking when you do this. Examples: a specific test of a piece of material or an assembly, a criterion or criteria for judgment, and a decision, yes or no, on the object of the material did or didn't meet the criteria. So very simple, but something that causes all kinds of problems, especially in procurement. You get what you ask for. You have to make sure you're asking in a way that covers all the bases and allows for you to ensure you're going to get something that will work in the application you have in mind. So key idea, operational definitions. Next area we're going to cover, appreciation for a system. We're going to cover the idea of having an aim, interaction, delays, and sub-optimization. I'll let you know, when I got into this stuff, I went off the deep end. I got into systems thinking. I bought software. I went deep into this in the late 90s, early aughts. Deming's first point is that systems vary in complexity. From low to high on degree of interdependence, you get a bowling team, very little interaction that has interdependence in terms of scoring. You root each other on, you get a guy a beer when his beer is empty, that's about it. An orchestra is much more interdependent than a bowling team. And the idea is that every individual must play their part on time, at the right volume, with being in tune and without stepping on or overpowering the others in the orchestra. Business is even higher in terms of its interdependence. And you need to keep the interdependence idea in mind when you're trying to work on systems, thinking of what might be affected. It's sometimes much broader and deeper than you realize. So Deming introduced this organization viewed as a system. We covered this yesterday as well. This is updated. The original system, organization viewed as a system, left out the 2 points at the top. He added the idea of a stage 0 when you generate new ideas to be considered in the design and redesign. And he also wanted to emphasize that you need an aim for an organization. So you have a North Star, the kind of thing that keeps everybody aligned as they're doing the detailed work they are in whatever part of the organization they're working. When a question comes up, what's the right thing to do? Think about the aim of the company and what is the right thing to do with the aim in mind. So that's a key point from Out of the Crisis. This is on page 3 of Out of the Crisis. This is another key idea. If you've got a system and you decide that the way to manage the system is to manage the parts, so you come up with this great idea. Let's break the organization into competitive units. Let's give them a budget. Let's give them individual targets. Let's measure their results independently of each other. That will destroy the system. Each of the organizational subsystems will work for their own needs and to meet their own targets for the year at the expense of the other parts of the business. And the classic one here is suppliers of material and equipment are managed by supply chain, and they would typically get a demand from the buyers that the buyers would tell the suppliers, we needed cost savings. And the suppliers would say, well, we can do thus and such. it'll be just as good almost. And supply chain makes the decision, all right, we're gonna make those changes, and it'll be just about as good, so it shouldn't be any problem. And it causes a big problem in production. And you end up making a bunch of scrap assemblies, and you end up with a big cost, and or it's just buried in the problems of production. Nobody recognizes the relationship, and you end up making the overall organization worse. And this happens all over the place, and it's really, and it's still happening. I've been retired for a few years, but until a few years ago, I was in this world, and I mentioned yesterday one of the biggest cost savings we made at the place I worked most recently was by reversing a supply chain decision that had been made the year previous. Go back to where we had been before, and it was then a cost savings over and above the original cost savings. Optimization of a system requires everybody to know what their job is. All the components have to be orchestrated towards achievement of the aim, and it's the aim of the organization, not the aim of the sub-pieces. So this was a quote from Deming. What kind of management have we had in the past? Pitting one division against another? Any wonder we're in trouble? I don't know. How many of you folks still see parts of the organization pitted against each other? Is that still happening? Systems are dynamic. So there's some observations I want to share about systems. First of all, cause and effect exist, but you have to understand the entire system before you can predict what's going to happen. Second point, it's critical to understand that there are time delays in systems. Sometimes you take an action and it doesn't make any impact, you think. So you say, oh, okay, everything's good. But there's a delayed response, and sometimes it's a bad response. And the third point is that the whole is a unique thing in and of itself. When you've got a system, you have to look at it in its entirety. Breaking it apart fundamentally changes its nature. The whole does not equal the sum of its parts. Now, back when I was really getting into this, I just happened to be watching on PBS a story about ecology, and they were telling a historical example that happened in the Pacific Northwest in nature. I thought it was a great example, and so I resurrected my example from 1990 or so, 1980 something, and it's an example of systems thinking contrasted with linear thinking, bringing out some of these points. It's the ecology of the Pacific Ocean near and around Vancouver Island, British Columbia. And what we're looking at here is my presentation from last year's InThinking conference. And to produce this, I went digging in my files, and I came up with the actual flimsies that I had made of this back in those days. So what you're looking at has some historical whatever. Here's the original system. This is a system of the harbor around that area. And it starts out in a system of being balanced and basically stasis. What you got going on, there's a bunch of players. You got otters, and otters interact with a couple different other things in the ecosystem. Otters, for one thing, they do is they eat salmon. They also eat sea urchins, and they happen to be preyed upon by killer whales. Killer whales eat otters. So if you go over to the right then, from here, the salmon and the otters interact with each other. The salmon also interact with very small fish. They eat small fish that are in the bay, and that's how that's why they are there. If you keep going clockwise, the small fish interact by being preyed upon by the salmon, but they also their reproduction happens in kelp beds. There's kelp that are growing on the bottom of the bay there. And the kelp provides cover and hatchery for the small fish. And then continuing around clockwise, sea urchins, while they're being eaten by otters, they also are eating the kelp. So the kelp provides the cover for the small fish, and killer whales are just off to the side coming in occasionally. So that's how the thing starts. Now, something happens. There's a event that occurs. People show up and decide to start gathering salmon. So the fishermen get started. And in the early teens of the 20th century through 1930, 35, fishermen were taking salmon. So they introduce themselves into the otter and salmon loop. So otters eat salmon, fishermen take salmon, salmon eat small fish. So that's the new system dynamic that occurs. And it can be, it can reach a stasis again, become an equilibrium. But that's what was going on. However, this is not what the fishermen saw. The fishermen saw, they were there for salmon. What they saw was their aim was to catch as much salmon as they could. They saw that otters were feeding on their salmon. And so they did what they thought was the right thing. Their obvious solution is kill as many sea otters as they could. So they eliminated the sea otter population in and around Vancouver Island, British Columbia, from 1930 to 35. So what do you think happened? Well, let's take a look. First of all, sea otters no longer ate salmon. That was what the fishermen were trying to accomplish. Turns out they didn't eat that much to begin with. The fishermen saw them catching salmon, but they didn't see them catching the sea urchins. They would just scoop them up off the bottom of the ocean, eat those. That was their primary diet. Salmon was the top off, the deluxe. When they were going out for steak, they got a salmon. So the killer whales no longer ate the sea otters. Otters no longer eat the sea urchins. The sea urchin population skyrocketed. What did they eat? The kelp beds. That wiped out the kelp beds. The kelp beds no longer provided a hatchery, a nursery, protection for the small fish that salmon depend on for food. So the population of the small fish disappeared. Without that food, the salmon left that area to seek better conditions elsewhere. And the catch of the fishermen went to zero. So the net result of the actions taken by the fishermen was exactly opposite what was intended. No one knows the effect on the killer whales. They went somewhere else. Now, it turns out the process was shown to be reversible. Around 1970, the sea otters were repopulated. They captured a viable group of them from Alaska. They brought them down, introduced them to the area, and that resulted in a reversal of all conditions. There are now salmon back in that area. But anyway, that's an introduction to the complexities of systems. And in business, it's even more complex than this, with all the different elements, the different players and their motives and ideas. So any comments or questions there?
It's just incredible how you don't see all those connections until you introduce a change.
Yes. Interesting. All right, system of profound knowledge, theory of psychology, people, motivation, and change. So motivation, there's two different kinds, intrinsic and extrinsic. Intrinsic sources of motivation. People do things because it brings them joy or satisfaction. They want to do it. This type of motivation leads to long-term engagement. Extrinsic sources of motivation. People do things not because they want to do it or the pleasure it brings, but for some kind of extrinsic reward granted after the task is complete, or to avoid punishment for not completing the task. They would not do the task, but for the reward or to avoid punishment. And those two sources of motivation result in something called over-justification. When an individual receives an extrinsic reward for activities they had previously done due to intrinsic motivation, when they observe the change relationship, they may conclude the activity is primarily for the reward rather than for the sense of accomplishment. You can take somebody who is happy in their activities and turn them into a extrinsic being driven to do the work by offering the over justification. It's one of those things that it's too easy to do, and it happens unfortunately very often. This is a reproduction of the New Economics, page 84, and the forces of destruction are Deming's contribution here. He starts out at life beginning and life ending across the top there. And one is born with intrinsic motivation, self-esteem, dignity, curiosity, joy, and learning. These attributes are high at the beginning of life, but are gradually crushed by the forces of destruction. The forces cause humiliation, fear, self-defense, competition. You get things like forced distribution of grades, a merit system, judging people, incentive pay, pay for performance, numerical goals, explanation of variances, explain every variance, sub-optimization, every group division, a profit center. So his point here is we've created a system that drives out the joy in work. And why did we choose to do that? It's I guess it goes back to Skinner and his ideas on scientific management. In any case, that's a tough slide to comprehend because it's so pervasive and so important for leaders. He always talked about the evaluation of people as it being wrong. Here's his example of why it's wrong. How do you quantify individual performance? You've got performance associated with an individual. The individual X. The individuals make their contribution. They're acted upon and affected by the environment in which they work, all the people they interact with, the systems they interact with, the suppliers, all the things that just come up in the systems that they're working in, and they get a result. So X, the contribution, plus YX, the impact of the environment on the individual, gets a numerical result. They achieved an 8 for the year. We need to know X, that's what we wish to know. I got one equation, two unknowns. You cannot solve for X. And a quote of his, he then can solve for equation, he that can solve that equation for X is entitled to give merit raises. I got the chance to work with a guy named Peter Schultes in a few instances. I learned a lot from him. He was a great guy. He was a former Franciscan friar turned management consultant. A very interesting guy. But I really liked one of the things he used to say about the conditions that allow for change to happen. So if you want change to happen, the three conditions you need are for, first of all, people need to feel good about themselves. That's a very interesting idea. Why do you think people need to feel good about themselves? Any ideas?
My experience has been that if people walk into work lacking energy, they will take energy from everybody else they work with. So if you're not feeling good about yourself, the only way to try, because we're all trying to feel good, you're going to feel good at someone else's expense.
Any other ideas? That's good. Any other ideas? I think what it's about is if you feel good about yourself, you feel that you're a capable person. And a change is going to require you to exert some energy. And if you feel good about yourself, you feel confident that, yeah, I could do that. I think it's got to do with self-confidence, the ability to have a good attitude at the start. Yeah, okay, that sounds like a challenge. I'm up for that challenge.
Self-efficacy, maybe.
Yeah. So people feel good about themselves. The next condition is that the change needs to involve their ideas. People don't like it when you come in and say, hey, we're going to change everything here. I'm going to tell you how to do it. You're stop doing that, do this instead. If you create an environment where the challenge to the organization is clear and you seek ideas for how might we make this change, and it involves their ideas, not just your ideas, they're going to be way more willing to buy in. And they probably are going to have better ideas than you will anyway. And then the last thing is the change needs to involve their motivations. So what's in it for me is part of it, but not necessarily that crass. It's how can this change help me do my job better? I thought that was all good stuff. I mean, how many folks here have heard of Peter Schultes?
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah. I really like that guy. He's passed on, geez, it's probably been 10 years now.
But he wrote a very good book, so.
Yeah, he did. All right. So we've got the last 15 minutes. I want to share some personal perspectives. I had the great privilege of attending numerous Deming 4-day seminars. In my role at GM, I was one of the co-leaders of the group aiming to, we were the internal consultants for making change happen. And one of our roles was attending Deming 4-day seminars. We had Hughes Aerospace had been purchased by General Motors. And one of the things that was purchased was satellites in outer space. And we had satellite downlink capabilities internal to General Motors. And we had a plan to bring Deming to everybody. And we had, I think it was about 20 different occasions where we had a remote, Deming was live at a location and he would be on screen for about 4 hours a day. And we had proctors, people who would be carrying on after the morning session for a learning activity until lunch, and then there was another learning activity with Deming, and then a practice and activity session. And we would kind of proctor those. So I attended probably a dozen different 4-day seminars. And I took lots and lots of notes. I was a prolific note taker. So I went back and I found a bunch of my notes, and I want to share some of the things I observed at the Deming 4-day seminars. So quotes and opening comments, etc. So opening comments. This was from November 7th, 1989. Why did you come? The aim is restoration of the individual. Management in the US has done a pretty good job of destroying the individual. All workers ask for is the opportunity to do a good job, to take joy in their work. Another opening comment. We're here to learn. For survival, there will be shock treatment. How do people learn? We learn from what we already know. We must be open to new thoughts. This is not stamping out fires. Of course, we have to put out fires. How do you learn? You can't generate learning. Learning must come from the outside. This comes as a shock. The customer does not generate ideas. He is a rapid learner, but the new ideas come from the producers. Innovation comes from people who have only themselves to satisfy. Restoration of the individual, joy in work, joy in learning, cooperation. It is only a matter of survival that we must do these things. Pretty radical stuff. Questions asked at 4-day seminars. November 7th, same seminar. What can lower level employees do to help the transition occur? Answer, learn it yourself first. Look for chances to help rather than complain. It takes a critical mass of people to effect a change. The critical mass is equal to the square root of the number of people you must influence. I found that quite interesting. I've never heard anybody else other than Deming say that. Question, it seems that the US culture is not ready for your ideas. Answer, culture is what you make it. The company can do anything. The company can crush people or it can give them a chance. Opening comments from a couple years later, February 26, 1991. Why are we here? To improve living in a material way, and maybe a spiritual way also. And it will require trade. This requires you to have something to sell. Today, a market exists for almost anything. A product or service possesses quality if it helps someone and enjoys a market. A system cannot understand itself. It needs profound knowledge coming from the outside. It's fun to learn and it's exciting. Help must come from the outside and by invitation. Doctors can only help people who recognize they have a problem. A doctor, when sick, consults another doctor. The greatest costs are unknown and unknowable, and they are the ones we must work on. People chase nickels and dimes and do not mind the $10 bills. Questions from that seminar. What one thing could we do to help GM as fast as possible? Answer, eliminate the ranking of people, regions, salesmen, divisions. Revise systems of reward. Just because your competitors are just as bad is not an excuse. July 14th, 1992, a year later. Why are we here? To learn and to have fun. What business are we in? The business we are in must include the future. We are being ruined by best efforts. Without knowledge, you just dig the pit deeper. With knowledge, best efforts will get you someplace. There is no substitute for knowledge. Each individual will go through a transformation, maybe on the third day, maybe on the second, and it will be discontinuous. Questions and answers, this same 1992 seminar. By the way, he was 92 years old answering these questions. He was sharp to the end. What is the difference between knowledge and information? The names of the capitals of the 50 states is information. Why is Albany where it is? From the perspectives of sociology, history, economics, topography, understanding why cities are where they are. This is knowledge. Question, without ranking, how do you choose a new manager? Answer, you choose by comparing candidates. This is not ranking. All people are different. You choose based on who would make a good manager. This was an interesting one. Are you aware of any companies that made the transformation? In a big booming voice, his deep voice, no. In what instance would you consider competition good? Answer, in games, why not? Poker, one winner. In games, there's a shortage of winners. Why should we carry that over to the rest of life? You mean there's a shortage of good people? A shortage of good students? I don't think so. And this one was the one that hit me hardest. Question, is this socialism? And he got quite angry. You said it, I didn't. Win-win. Let's all win. Is that wrong? Everybody get ahead. Is this socialism? That is nonsense. Then he went over to the thing that you the flimsies and you write on them and you can
The overhead projector and all.
Overhead projector with a flimsy.
Yeah.
And he put this on the chart. He said, definition of socialism is to pull people into the middle. So he drew this kind of normal curve, and he drew this, pull the tails in. That's what socialism is. Move everyone up here, everyone win. He drew above a narrower distribution, a curve that looked like that, and said, move everybody up here, everybody win. Continued in that vein a little bit. The next question, is capitalism inconsistent with optimization of a system? Answer, no, capitalism is not inconsistent. The problem is we do not have capitalism. We have win-lose. Question, how would you reward a top salesman who is doing well for the company? Answer, a better question is, should you reward him? Reward him for doing his job? He's only doing his job. Regarding development of standards within an industry, doesn't that impede progress? Answer, anyone who works on standardization knows that within 5 years, the standards must be revised. The standards are the road to continual improvement. How broadly should you define a system? A company, an industry, the country? Answer, it depends on how much you can manage. The larger the system, the greater the benefits, but the harder to manage. And see how much time we have. I got 5 minutes left. Some personal observations. I got to spend a lot of time with Deming. I would go pick him up at the airport and take him to meetings. And I really felt I understood him. He was born in 1900. My granddad was born in 1899. He was born on a farm. My granddad was born on a farm. My granddad was a farmer till he lost the family farm in the Depression in 1931. And the folks, my grandparents were the kind of folks that didn't complain. They just got stuff done, didn't speak a lot. You knew they cared for you, but they were people of few words. I kind of felt like I had an understanding of where Deming was coming from his early days and the way he thought about other people. And he used to talk about barn raisings, and my granddad talked about barn raising. So I had one time that I really saw he was so humble, while at the same time he could appear so arrogant. The humility. One time I was with him. He needed to use the bathroom. I went in to make sure he was okay. He came out at the sink and he washed his hands, and there was a dispenser for the paper towel, and I ran it down about 3 or 4 times so he'd have a nice big piece of paper towel. And he reprimanded me. Oh, no, don't waste. Don't use that much. Just exact same thing my granddad would have done. He was very patient with me. He was the kind of guy who, if you were arrogant yourself and came at him with a different perspective and were kind of trying to bully, he would light you up. He would light you up that way. But if you came to him with an honest question, with a sincere interest to learn, he was as patient as could be, would take all kinds of time. And I learned a lot from the guy that way. So anyway, I just, a couple vignettes of things that I observed from him that I thought might be interesting. And that kind of wraps it up. We've got a few minutes before the hour. Any discussion, any Q&A anybody has?
Just thank you for presenting this. This was, refreshing and sometimes in this community especially, you get the idea that you kind of have you've learned it, you've heard all this, but it always does me good to hear it again, especially from somebody, you know, with a little more insight to it than I've been able to glean. And just thanks for that.
Very good.
I learned 3 things, Mike. Thanks. I wrote down some notes. I'm going to put 2 of them in my talk. So thank you
Very
for
good.
that.
Which 3 were they?
I really like, when you talk about intrinsic motivation, because that's part of my talk, and there's the conscious intrinsic, which everybody talks about, and you kind of showed me the difference of that. And in my talk, I talk about the unconscious intrinsic, which gets more even to the uniqueness. So this idea of 2 different people could do something and it would fit for one and fit for the other. And then the other thing is theories aren't proven. We got to remember that you can never go, this is a proven theory. That right away should just disqualify you from talking about that.
Yes. Very good.
Yeah, theories aren't laws.
Right.
Thank you, Mike. I was chuckling away when you were rewarding the top salesman. And just last week, having discussion with my daughter and her school and how they're dishing out house points for, are you dressed in the correct uniform? Have you got all of your equipment that you should have? Just doing their job.
Yeah.
In the
It's
military,
rife.
in the military and boot camp, they didn't reward you for being squared away. But they definitely pointed it out if you weren't.
That's extrinsic motivation for sure.
Absolutely, to the extreme, yes.
Yes. All right. Well, it sounds like we're kind of wrapped up. What's the date of the next one, Chuck?
It's the third Thursday of November, whatever that is. It's our third Tuesday. Let me
That's
find
the
the
Tuesday
calendar.
before Thanksgiving, probably, right?
It sounds like that. Yeah. I mean, I think that's when these are, right? Or is it the second Tuesday?
No, you're
That's
right.
the
The
third.
3rd. I think it was like the 17th.
Okay. I don't have it in my calendar yet, but
It's just a 1-parter. Bill and Mike did 2-parters. It's just a 1-parter. So
yeah, I think those are because they're I don't know, there's sometimes there's a reason for that. Sometimes you can condense it down. I think these things don't lend themselves to quite as much discussion back and forth. So you can get them done.
And
well,
it's you, John, next, right? John, you're
yeah,
next,
I
right?
know that's the problem. We'll see what happens because, like I said, there was an hour of questions after my talk in the room. Then we got kicked out of the room. Then there was an hour and a half of questions after the talk outside the room. So
Yeah.
we'll probably stress that next month.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm expecting that it is the 18th.
18th, okay. It's the
That'd be
third.
the third Tuesday.
Yep, 18th then.
Very
Okay.
good.
Is it
Cool.
same time?
Yes, which I think tends to be 10 a.m. Pacific time and then adjust
1 p.m.
accordingly.
Eastern.
Yeah.
Yep.
And 8 o'clock p.m. Finnish time.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's black.
Well, thanks for paying attention and listening, guys. I really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing your faces again in a month and learning from
Yep.
John.
Well,
Okay. Very good.
thank you, Mike. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Stop the recording. Stop the recording.
Hey, Mike,
Yes,
this
Dirk.
is Dirk Van Putten. I still have a copy of your ongoing discussion presentation from March of 2015 entitled
Is that-
By What Method?
Very good.
So you have a legacy with me. I still have your presentation, still keep it.
Well,
So
that's
thank
great.
you. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate all your helping us all learn and improve. So thank you again.
I'm glad to hear that. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.